in order to do this review, I'm going to need that guy's leg. Hello and welcome to Nelson All Over Cards. Today we are talking about and doing a deep dive on Racoon in Marvel Champions. We're going to be talking about his kit, some of the basic cards he likes. We're going to rank the aspects in terms of what he's least good in to best good in, and then put him into an overall ranking of Marvel Champions heroes. I did just get done playing 4 games with Rocket on live stream. Actually, I think it turned out to be like 5 or 6, but regardless, I played in all of the aspects, so if you want to find those videos, those are going to be down below, but those are kind of what I do to lead into what we're doing today, talking about Rocket. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Rocket is one of the heroes that has the same name and alter ego as well as hero form. So if we're talking about his alter ego, he doesn't have the best recovery. It's only 3, which is on the low end, but he does have an awesome ability called Tinkering, which allows you to discard a tech upgrade you control in order to draw 2 cards. What's great about all of this is that he has a ton of weapons and tech upgrades in his kit that come with charge counters that are not uses, meaning that if you deplete the charge counters on those cards, they actually do not get discarded. So you can sit out with like a battery pack without any charges. You can flip down to Alter Ego, tinker it, and draw 2 cards. So you can use it to set up and get the full utilization out of like the cards in his kit before you tinker them. The other fun interaction that sometimes I will do, especially maybe on like that first turn, is to use these one cost upgrades to kind of cycle cards into something that is a little bit better of a building block. So for example, right, like battery pack, we just talked about that. It's a 1 cost upgrade, and in order to play that is 2 effective resources. It's the card and then the 1 cost. So put it on the table, and then you're down 2 cards. You can then tinker that for 2 cards. So you're not net plus cards, but if on that first turn you don't draw into exactly what you need, or actually I guess any turn, you can play it and then basically see 2 extra cards. I don't always do it, but it is just kind of a fun interaction for those 1 cost upgrades, which he has a couple of options for. Because that ability is so good, he does like to flip down, but he doesn't have a ton of other cards, or actually any other cards in his kit that support his alter ego side. We'll talk about some of the basic cards and some of the aspect cards that can lean into that a little bit more, but until then, let's talk about the hero. When you flip his card over, his stat line is a 2-1-1, which is not that great, but he does have upgrades in his kit that get it up to a 3-2-1, and we'll talk about those here in a second. But really, the beauty of Rocket comes in with his ability, which is called Murdered You, and it says whenever you deal excess damage to an enemy, you get to draw a card. Rocket's all about drawing cards, and it can get very, very, very cool. Once you do get that ball rolling, you get to draw a ton of cards. He has a ton of weapons in his kit that help you do this. Now, one caveat and one word of caution is that all of these weapons are restricted, and so you're only allowed to have 2 restricted weapons on the table, or 2 restricted cards on the table at the same time. So you do have to be careful on what is at the table at a given time. So with that being said, let's talk about his weapons. Starting out is my favorite weapon in his entire kit, because I wanted to go ahead and start with the fun one, or actually they're all fun, but the most fun one, and that is Particle Cannon. Ooh, it is 2 counters, so it's a 3 cost upgrade. It comes from 2 counters, and you can exhaust it, spin a counter to deal 4 damage to an enemy with overkill and ranged. So this is really exciting because you get that overkill damage, so any damage dealt to a minion will spill over to the villain, triggering his Murdered You ability, as well as being able to just deal a lot of damage. Rocket is a great minion controller, and you can kind of set it up because Rocket is so interesting. He's kind of a fun puzzle to try and figure out exactly how you are going to play cards so that you can get that excess damage, because that is always what you want to be doing. Particle Cannon rewards you, incentivizes you even more with that excess because it has overkill, but you can maybe attack, then use Particle Cannon if there's a 4 health minion out there. But there is a lot of ways to set it up so that you can trigger the overkill as well as the Murdered You ability with Particle Cannon. The other 3 cost card in his kit is called Rocket Launcher. This is same 3 cost, 2 charges, except you get to choose a character, and you get to deal 2 damage to the villain and then 2 damage to all the minions engaged with that character. In solo, this is probably the one I pass on the most. It is fairly expensive. It can be nice. The 2 damage can be nice, but it takes up that restricted slot. It's expensive in cost, and it's expensive an opportunity cost. So if I have this as on the table as one of my restricted cards, that means I'm not putting something else out there. And a lot of the time, I am not being able to trigger a ton of options for the rocket launcher. Now, that being said, there are scenarios that this works incredibly well on, and the game state could dictate that you want to play this. I'm just saying it's probably the least likely one to make it onto the table. That being said, it still does make it onto the table. If you do this with like Ultron or like a multi-minion scenario, and you can set it up so that this particle cannon is going to take out like 3 Ultron drones, you get to draw 3 cards. Now, it's obviously always going on the table. But so you just kind of have to read the situation. This one's a little bit less flexible than that particle cannon, and so it's kind of sometimes, or I guess a lot of the times, it is a pass for me unless the scenario presents itself to be a good play. I will say, quick other caveat, is in multiplayer this gets a lot more use because you can choose any character and deal damage to them. So if you have cleaned up your board state, you can actually, look over there at the spider character or whoever is playing alongside of you and help them out a lot. It's also really good to deal the damage to set them up to trigger murdered use with a basic attack or something else. So there are situations that it can be pretty useful, but this one is probably the one I'm passing on the most. The last 2 weapons that he has in his kit are his 2 pistols, so he has 2 of these. They come in 3 counters. You can exhaust them, use a counter to deal 6 damage. So it's a time value of damage, I guess is what we can look at it. So 6 damage over 3 activations, which a lot of the times is 3 turns. Now there are some ways to manipulate that with Rocket, but it's fairly decent. And also it's that 2 damage, which is nice because it can trigger the murdered you ability if you're sitting with 1 health on a minion. It's also just nice to kind of clear some toughs so that you can hit that particle cannon. Big activation. It's a nice one. It's also that 1 cost, so you can use it to tinker. Typically, I don't like tinkering the Rocket's pistols on turn 1 if I don't have to, but it is an option. A lot of the rest of the cards in Rocket's kit support these weapons. So cards like Salvage, this is a really solid card. It's a resource card that comes with a mental and a wild resource icon, so it's a double. He has 2 of these. And so not only does it give you that double resource that you can pay and use, and if you have watched the resource video that I did with Villain Theory, we kind of talk about how some of these resource cards can, affect the deck build fairly significantly, but also it allows you to bring a tech upgrade from your discard pile back to the top of the deck. So if you tinker a rocket launcher, or if you tinker a particle cannon, or you tinker something, or something gets discarded with cut off guard and you need it back, you can use Salvage to go get that on your next card draw, which can be that same turn. If you trigger Murdered You get to draw a card. So Salvage is just an incredibly good card that gives you an extra double, a non-restricted double, so you can spend it on anything, and it allows you to get the tech upgrade that you need. So I'm a huge fan of Salvage. I think it's a really solid one. One of the other cards that helps with the support of Rocket's weapons is the battery pack. This helps you reload, which I guess is a little confusing because he also has a card called Reload, but battery packs help you put counters back onto your guns. They're also great tinkers. They're 1 cost. You can move a charge counter over to another gun and then tinker them. They come in with 2, so these are my favorite to tinker because you can throw it out there, put a charge counter on particle cannon. Jeez, okay. Particle cannon, get that additional 4 damage, and then you can do it again the next turn. That's 8 damage for 2 effective costs. Then you can tinker it and get those 2 cards right back. And so it's just a very flexible card. You can put it on anything that you want. If you're playing Ultron, throw it on your rocket launcher. And now you have multiple activations of the rocket launcher, and you just get a little bit of flexibility. There are some other options that you can do. You can throw it on your sonic rifles if you're playing a Justice game. Or some of the other aspect tech cards. So it's just a really flexible option that pays for itself because you can tinker it again, which is so freaking cool. If you throw it on your sonic rifles, it gives you a free Confuse, which then you can roll down and tinker it. So it's just like, it's just a fun card. It's a fun card, and I really like it. What's nice is that if you use your Reload card, which is a 1 cost event, you get to ready all the tech upgrades. So now you have battery pack, you moved a charge over to your particle cannon, you use your particle cannon, now you can play Reload, stand them both back up, use move a charge back over to Particle Cannon, use it again. Now you can flip down and tinker your battery pack. So there's a lot of flexibility. Now, what I will say is that this card doesn't get you anything like extra. It's not any more stuff, but it does give you pacing. So it's a great card to play if you have a short-term problem, like there's a huge minion out there that you really need to take care of. This gets you effectively a whole nother turn with your tech cards. But if you don't have that, if you don't really need that tempo boost, you can toss this card as a resource and then hope that and then have it come back up at the right time. So a lot of the times early game, I don't necessarily find myself playing these cards. However, later game when if I just flip the villain and I need to do like a massive push to take out a couple of the minions that they've pulled out, this can be a really, really solid card to pull out to increase that tempo. One of the other reasons that I would play Reload is if I am on a Schadenfreude turn, which is a 2-cost event that says you get to heal 2 damage each time you deal damage to an enemy. And so now your basic activation heals you 2, all of your weapon upgrades heal you 2, and then if you can reload, stand them up, and do it again, then you get even more healing. And so Rocket only has 9 hit points and 1 defense, so he can be pretty squishy. And Schadenfreude is kind of that get out of jail free card where you can take a lot of damage. You can take damage with Rocket, knowing that if you have a solid Schadenfreude turn, you can heal pretty much all of it back up. The other thing that I will say about Schadenfreude is Rocket Launcher gets some crazy efficiency here. So if you are looking at a character at the table, if it's solo, it would be you. If you have 2 minions and the villain, you get to hit the villain and the 2 minions. Even if they're guard, Rocket Launcher is not an attack, and so you can get around the guard and you get 6 heal for 1 Rocket Launcher activation. And so that's another reason or another thought of, should I play a Rocket Launcher if I'm going to be taking a lot of damage? There's just a lot of options, and it can really help you get out of a tough spot. Schadenfreude is a really cool card that helps offset one of Rocket's biggest weaknesses, which is his survivability. Rocket has some other upgrades that are not restricted weapons too. He's got 2 of these that kind of boost his stats. Cybernetic Skeleton gives you, it's a 2-cost upgrade. It gives you +3 hit points and then 1 attack, which is a nice 33% boost to your health, making his attack better. Now, this can be good to trigger that Murdered You ability. Now you're at 2, so you actually can use a basic activation to trigger Murdered You if you have a minion with 1 health remaining. And what I will say is, in a lot of aspects in solo, I'm not necessarily using this +1 attack as much because he is using I'm typically using his basic activation to help with thwarting and letting the guns do the damage. In a solo game, typically the guns can handle the damage that you need. This is nice for that health boost, and it can be nice for the +1 attack, but that activation of his 2 thwarts and then with his thruster boost, which gives him a +1 thwart to 3 thwarts, is very, very valuable. All that being said is that depending on the situation that you're in, if you don't have any side schemes, if it's not a villain that's throwing out a super big amount of threat, this is really nice because maybe it's every other turn you're thwarting. If you have 3 thwarts, maybe you don't need to thwart every turn. And so now the Cybernetic Skeleton is giving you a +1 attack, so you can thwart on a turn, clear threats, let it build up a little bit more because you have a massive thwart stat. So you build it up, thwart again, and then you can use, on that off turn, you can use your basic attack to get a Murdered You trigger. So there are options. Rocket is very much can I figure out how to most effectively maximize what I have on the table at each time, which can be a really fun puzzle and does take a little bit of time to understand and get on that learning curve, that complexity curve. Rocket is not the easiest character to play. He takes a little bit of time to figure out exactly how to survive and set himself up so that he can have these massive Murdered You abilities. The other thing that Thruster Boots does, which I will state here real quick, is it gives Rocket Aerial, which opens up a lot of the aerial cards that we see, as well as some of the new stuff that we're going to be getting in Angel's Pack. So Rocket is going to be getting a little bit better with Aerial. It's not printed. He doesn't start with it, but he can easily get it with his Thruster Boots. And so, kind of exciting. We just have more ways that Rocket, or that I guess any character with Aerial, or any character with new packs, they get more interesting. And Thruster Boots, giving Rocket Aerial, now that we're getting more aerial cards, is really, really cool. The last card that we're going to talk about, or the last card in his kit, I guess, I've Got a Plan, is a 1-cost event that says, it's a response that says, after you make a basic thwart activation, you get to spin this card ready, and Rocket gets a +1 thwart until the end of the phase. A lot of the time, this additional thwart can be overkill in a solo game. Now, there are scenarios where it's not. Venom Goblin, where you're just drowning in threat, it's not. But a lot of the time, it can be overkill. So, in multiplayer, this makes Rocket a thwarting machine. He can take care of so much threat once he has his boots, as well as this. I mean, he's removing 7 threat just from his 2 basic activations. Significant. That being said, it can be nice to play this card, especially if you have that cybernetic skeleton out, where you make a basic thwart, you ready, and maybe that +1 thwart doesn't get you anything, but that additional ready, again, gives you that tempo. You can then attack. You can get an overkill. If you have your skeleton out, you have a +1 attack, so now it's a murder you trigger. So there are options, and it's not a card I always play in solo, because it can be lost efficiency. But there are times, and that's part of that learning curve of Rocket, is figuring out when you do want to be playing these cards. Those are the cards in his kit. Now let's talk about his cost curve. And so on the screen now, you're going to see Rocket's base cost curve. This is the cost curve of his hero kit, and it is pretty low. It averages a cost of 1.46 per card, putting him in the bottom 10 of cost. Now, if we combine that with his pretty awesome card draw, it allows us to be pretty flexible in his deck building. So with his salvages, it's nice to be able to add some more expensive tech cards. You can run your doubles, salvages. If you want to run power-ups, you can. I don't think it's always necessary to do so, but if you have those 5 resources, your doubles, your salvages, right there, you have a lot of money. You have a lot of card draw with your tinkering, as well as your murder do ability, and so you can run the power-ups, because you'll probably be able to line those up with a valid target, and you can run some of those higher cost cards. Now, you don't want to go too crazy with the high cost cards, but he absolutely has room to add a good number of higher cost cards in there to flatten out that resource cost curve and make it so that he has the flexibility. And so he has a really good economy, he has really good card draw, and so you don't necessarily need to add only inexpensive cards into his kit. He can pay for some of those more expensive cards. So that makes deck building with him a pretty good time. Speaking of deck building, let's talk about some of the basic cards that I'm looking to run. Maybe not in all of my Rocket decks, but in a lot of my Rocket decks. Side Holster is a great one. 0 cost upgrade. You get another restricted slot for weapons, which just helps Rocket do what Rocket wants to do. So that one pretty much goes in a lot of my Rocket decks. Next up is Crew Quarters. Now, Crew Quarters is nice because you do want to be flipping down to Alter Ego. This allows you on every trip down to heal 2, so you can go down, you can use your tinkering ability, but you also get that Crew Quarter activation so that you can heal, and you don't need to use your basic activation to recover. You can use your for thwarting or whatever you need to do. But Crew Quarters is a nice one to kind of make sure that Rocket doesn't die, which is one of Rocket's biggest issues. Also, on his Alter Ego side, he is a genius trait, opening up the play of Ingenuity. So this is a card, it's a resource generator, 2 cost upgrade that allows you to exhaust to generate a mental resource. And you can only play it if you have the genius trait. Rocket can do that. And then one of the last things is I'm typically running Endurance with Rocket just because he can be squishy. He does like to farm these minions, which can bring in additional activations against him, and his health can be an issue. Endurance. Endurance gives you a +3 hit points. So now with that skeleton, you're up to 15 health, meaning that's a lot safer to bring out some of these minions so that you can take the damage, you can take the hit, so you can really exploit Schadenfreude and get that health all the way back up to 15. I like Endurance with Rocket. Last thing I will say is that a lot of the Guardian allies are gray, which means that he can run these in pretty much any of his builds, and he likes a lot of them. Groot is a really good ally for minion blocking. Groot can block the minions. Rocket likes to take the minions so that he can then kill the minions. And then also Flora and Fauna is a fairly decent, or it's a really good team up card. And it's one of the only cards based on Brant's recommendation that I run in solo. Because Groot has such survivability, he gets to heal after he defends. You can have Groot on the table, meaning that you can play Flora and Fauna. Wow. So that you can get those counters on your upgrades, ready them, and all of that good stuff so that you have the ability to protect Rocket a little bit better. Let's move into talking about the aspects. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to rank the aspects in terms of what he's least good in to what he's best in, and then we're going to talk about my favorite when I do get there. But in fourth place, we have leadership. Leadership is okay. Most of the good Guardian allies are basic. So when you're looking at running your allies where you're wanting to run like 5 to 7-ish on average, a lot of those get taken up by basic slots, meaning that the leadership benefits of having like really good allies are not necessarily there. Now, leadership has other options, et cetera, but really leadership is not his best aspect. A lot of the tech that comes with leadership attached to allies, you can tinker those off. They give you a lot more like one cost tech upgrades so that you can tinker those. So there are some fun interactions that you can do with that. But really, leadership, what I like to do with leadership the most is use your allies to help set them up for that overkill damage. And so you use, I don't know, whatever, Ronin out there to deal 3 damage, putting a minion at 1 health so that Rocket can then use his pistol to overkill. So it just gives you more options, but really the allies that come in leadership are no better at doing that than other allies. So leadership is at the bottom of the list for that reason. In third place, we have Justice. He does like to flip a lot, and so he can use the aspect cards to control threat, and then you can, Cybernetic Skeleton becomes a better upgrade at that point because then you can use your basic activation to attack and let the Justice cards do the thwarting for you. It also comes with Sonic Rifle, meaning that you can have a really solid confused lock because Sonic Rifle takes up that slot. You can use battery packs to just power it, and then you get a free flip down so that you can tinker. And so Justice works because he likes to be flipping a lot, but a lot of the times Rocket can manage threat with just his basic activation, and so that's why it's in third place. Moving on to second place, we have Protection. Protection is good. Protection, I feel like I've done a lot of talks about tech characters recently with like Iron Man, but Protection is that tech aspect. They have a lot of tech in the green aspect, and also Rocket loves a repurpose build. Repurpose that 0 cost event, discard a tech upgrade, ready your hero, you get plus X, where X is the cost of the card, to one of those basic stats for the rest of the turn, or I guess, yeah, the rest of the round. And so Rocket has a lot of targets for repurposing. He also has a lot of card draw, so you can probably hit multiple repurposes in a single turn if you have set it up correctly. So Rocket can get a little crazy with repurpose and protection. It also comes with a lot of options to help protect that health pool. So if you're using energy barriers, expecting to repurpose them later, you can use them to help protect his health, and that's why it's in second. This is probably my favorite way to play. I have realized that I absolutely adore the repurpose archetype, and so protection, I guess do I really even have to say that protection is my favorite at this point? I guess there are some heroes where protection is not my favorite aspect, but it usually is. So I guess that's no surprise. But that does lead us to our best aspect, which is aggression. Aggression is the aspect that helps you find minions and kill them, which is exactly what Rocket wants to do. And so you have cards like Relentless Assault, and that deals damage. Overkill is triggering Murder You, also that overkill damage. Into the Fray is an interesting card, especially if you have like a high threat scenario. Like if you're like facing off against Thanos and you threat out at 12 per player, Relentless Assault can help with a lot of that threat. Into the Fray can help with a lot of that threat mitigation, as well as triggering the Murder You ability. But also, Hone Technique for Rocket, I think, works so very well. He has access to Ingenuity, giving you that mental kicker so that you can trigger the Hone Technique, adding the cost into the damage of the card with Ingenuity. And so cards with multi-attacks get really good. So melees become a 3 for a 6/6, which you can probably, if you're going up against 2 minions, trigger 2 Murder Yous. For that, you get 2 card discount. Dive Bomb with Aerial. Rocket Dive Bomb is a little absurd, especially in that multiplayer setting, because you can deal 11 damage to the villain, 5 damage to everything on the table, and a lot of the time that 5 damage to everything on the table is going to clear a lot of minions, triggering like, if you're playing a 4-player game, it could trigger like 6 card draw, or even more. Like, I don't know why I went to 6, but Aggression has so many toys that Rocket can play with and work with so that he can always be consistently hitting that murder do ability as well as multi-attacks. That just makes aggression so very strong for him. Looking at the community, we lined up fairly well with the aspects. I think we had protection and justice flipped, but that's totally fair. They did vote aggression as the best by a wide margin, and I do agree with them. They also voted him at a B, maybe in that B plus tier. Is kind of split between the B and the A. And overall, I'm going to agree with them. I'm going to drop him in as a B tier, right behind Black Panther. He has like pretty high variance with minion heavy scenarios. What I mean by that is Rocket without minions is a good character. He can be solid. He can still do what he needs to do. If you throw him in a scenario that has a significant amount of minions, his ceiling is so high. He can be so very strong with so many minions. That being said, that high variance actually decreases his power level for me because we're not looking at his best aspect against his best matchup. That puts him even higher than that B tier. However, we're looking at an overall ranking with all the different aspects, and that's why he's running into that B tier. Something new that I'm trying, and again, take this with a grain of salt. I do not play a lot of multiplayer, but I've been asked to kind of talk about multiplayer in some of these videos. Rocket is a beast in multiplayer. More minions makes him more happy, meaning that your team can help set him up to do that overkill damage, and so they don't get as incentivized. Most characters do not get as incentivized as killing minions as Rocket. And so if they can help set them up so that you can overkill their minions, it makes Rocket very, very strong. Also, all of his guns are off turn activations. And so you can set it up so that you can do pretty much everything outside of your own turn, which makes it very flexible in a multiplayer setting. You can call on a lot of actions, use his particle cannon to clear out a guard for your teammate, which then can throw their damage at the villain, as well as getting you that card draw. All in all, Rocket is a pretty solid solo hero, but I think a very, very strong multiplayer character. He's got damage. If you want, he can fill a lot of roles. Maybe not the protective role. What I mean by that is like defending for people. He can play allies, I guess, but like he has dive bomb, which can control minions. I got a plan and completely control the threat. So whatever role you need Rocket to fit in, I think he can do that and more in a multiplayer setting. Overall, I think Rocket is an incredibly fun hero. He has so many satisfying puzzles to figure out on how and where to place your damage so that you can trigger your murdered you ability, when to flip down to tinker, and which items to tinker so that you can get the right card draw at the right time. He can have some really satisfying, very long turns because a lot of the time you're drawing additional cards, which changes up the variables in which you can play with. So a lot of heroes, you're sitting there, you may get an extra card draw from an Avengers Mansion, and so now you have one more card that can change the options in your hand. Rocket, on the other hand, can sit there and easily draw like 4 extra cards on a turn, which is almost a whole nother hand, which just completely changes what he can do and the output that he has. So it's very fun. He requires some pretty intense tactical decision making, like in the moment tactical decision making, but it is really exciting. He is going to get better with aerial cards. He is going to get better once we get more tech cards. So all of these things that are helping other heroes can help Rocket as well, based on where you want to play. Rocket is becoming a better character, and I think he's just an incredibly fun character. I have so much fun with Rocket. I think he's awesome. He's a fun character. So that's going to be it for Rocket today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I love to hear those. If I am missing some fun interaction, love to hear those. If you have any deck builds, please share those in the comments because I do really enjoy taking the time to look through and converse with you all about those. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I do a lot of these types of videos. I do a lot of card game videos, but I do a lot of reviews on Marvel Champions. So there will be more to come if you want to see more. So I appreciate you all hanging out. And until next time, peace. So I appreciate you all hanging out. And next up we have Hulk. So I've already done the Hulk game. I'm a little bit behind on these review videos, but hopefully we'll get caught up here soon. But until next time, I appreciate y'all, and I'll see you around. Peace.